Hi, everyone. Welcome to DevOps Unbound. I'm Alan Shimel, your host, and this is another episode of DevOps Unbound. For those of you who are not familiar, maybe this is your first time watching, DevOps Unbound is a bi-weekly, meaning every 2 weeks, video series that we do here in partnership between TechStrong Group and our good friends at Tricentis, the worldwide leaders in continuous testing. And we explore relevant topics in DevOps, of all things. We've been doing this almost 3 years now. We love it. About every third episode of DevOps Unbound, we actually do it with a live studio audience where you guys get to drive the questions, the comments, the conversation. Unfortunately, today's not one of those days. You're watching this on a recorded session, maybe on TechStrong TV or at our TechStrong.tv site or on any of the TechStrong Group websites such as DevOps.com, Security Boulevard, Cloud Native now, Digital CXO, TechStrong.ai, and our latest, TechStrongITSM.com. Or maybe you're watching this even on the Tricentis site or YouTube. But wherever it is, we're glad you can join us. We've got a great show lined up for today. You know, the last couple episodes of DevOps Unbound, we've been on this arc called DevOps Building Blocks. This is the last block in the DevOps Building Blocks series. It's part 6, and we're going to be talking about really cool things like day 2 DevOps, operations, and ops and DevOps, and SRE, which is always a big category. I mentioned this is a joint production with Tricentis, and many thanks to Tricentis. We couldn't do this without them. Not just their sponsorship in terms of writing a check or whatever, but really they're a full partner with us in every sense of the word here. They help craft the abstracts, the topics. They help us with guests. They've just been fantastic to work with. So a huge shout out to Lanier Norval and the rest of the Tricentis team. Let me introduce you to a great panel that we've got lined up for you today. First of all, he's up in the top left on my screen. I don't know where he is on your screen, though. He's my good friend, formerly of Comcast, but he's been with Contrast Security now for a couple of years. He's just a fireball and a great source of knowledge. Larry Maccherone. Larry, welcome.
Thank you, Alan. Glad to be here.
You know, I went skimming over your background, but why don't you fully introduce yourself?
Sure. I mean, so I was the head of application security for Comcast for 5 years, 10,000 developers, 600 different development teams, lots of different properties. So scaling development and DevOps and DevSecOps in particular is sort of my specialty. I now work at Contrast, where I help other companies do this. So.
Absolutely, and it's a pleasure to have you here, Larry. Next up, she's on the top right of my screen, is our friend Adriana Villela. Adriana, if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself.
Yeah. Hi, my name is Adriana Villela. I am a senior staff developer advocate at ServiceNow Cloud Observability. You might remember a former name, Lightstep. I started out my career as a software engineer, got into the DevOps, and then just naturally made my way into the observability space, and that's where most of my work is. I work with a lot with OpenTelemetry. I'm part of the Hotel End User Working Group, and I love talking about observability, and I also dabble into some platform engineering.
Interesting. Thank you for joining us, Adriana. Next up, bottom left on my screen, he always has great things to say. Comes from his own life experiences, many years in the performance engineering space. Our friend Bryan Cole.
Hello, everybody. My name is Bryan Cole. I'm the Director of Customer Engineering for Neoload here at Tricentis. And my background has specialized in performance engineering, but more broadly in the quality engineering space. So I have seen the evolution going from waterfall through agile into DevOps and what has to happen to the quality organization to remain meaningful participants in the process.
Excellent. Thanks for joining us, Bryan. Next up, bottom right on my screen. So you can tell I'm going left to right, top to bottom, right? Next up is Ana-Margarita Medina. She's been on with us before as well, and it's a pleasure to have her back. Hi, Anna. How are you? If you wouldn't mind introducing yourself.
Hey, happy to be here. My name's Ana-Margarita Medina. I'm also a senior staff developer advocate with ServiceNow, and I sit on the cloud observability side of stuff. I come from a self-taught background in software engineering, got into the front end, back end, mobile development, and I've been focusing in reliability for the last 8 years. It all started as I worked in the site reliability engineering team at Uber, and then transitioned to doing chaos engineering with a startup called Gremlin, and been focusing on observability the last 2 years. So just a little bit of here and there of SRE pillars.
Thank you, and thanks for joining us. Can you say your name again for me?
Ana-Margarita Medina. That's if you say
No matter
it
what
with
I
a
do, I
Latina
just can't
accent.
make my tongue do that. Damn, that's great. I love it.
It's a beautiful thing. It's great.
That is a
Great name.
beautiful thing. I try and try and try, and I'm like, ugh.
You did really
Anyway,
well, though.
well, the best I can. You know, I'm starting behind the 8 ball there, but thank you, and thank you for joining us. And what a great background. Got some interesting folks from the observability space. And, you know, one of the things in my mind is when we look at where the action is in ops and a lot in DevOps and cloud native, as we'll see in KubeCon in another week or two, observability is on fire, right? Like we see those little, the little fire icons next to stuff. And that's a big part of this day 2, I think, DevOps day 2. But you know, when did you first hear the term DevOps, day 2 DevOps? I remember when I did, but let me throw it out at the panel. When did you guys first hear the term day 2 DevOps, and what does it mean to you? Who wants to go first?
I'll head in first.
Actually, before we do, I got to stop us a second. I messed up. I forgot to introduce my co-host. And I've done this before. Yeah, no, I got so enthralled with the way Ana-Margarita said her name that I lost my head. I apologize.
I'm right there with you. I missed it too.
Joining me as always, my co-host here on DevOps Unbound and at Textron Group is my friend Mitchell Ashley, who's our CTO and principal research analyst. Mitchell, say hello.
It's a pleasure to be here with everybody. Thank you, panel, for joining us.
Thank you. All right. Back to it now. So day 2 DevOps, when did you first hear it and what does it mean to you? Brian, you were going to go on that, right?
Well, I probably heard the term first in 2019, really as a reflection of the understanding that DevOps, the conversation that I'd been involved with prior to that was very dev-centric. It was all dev. In fact, it was very focused on the CI pipeline. It was very focused on aligning the development tool sets to help drive the software delivery process through. And a lot of organizations coming to the realization that saying you have a DevOps process that ends when you hand over to quality assurance is not a DevOps process. And it needs to go substantially further than that and involve the IT operations teams.
Excellent. Anyone else?
Yeah, if I may chime in, I honestly can't remember when I heard the term day 2 DevOps, but I completely agree with what Brian was saying because I did find, and it was around like 2019 where we were at a point where like we got the CI pipelines absolutely nailed, but we were still not getting that velocity that, DevOps promised because we were still stuck on the delivery portion. And I think, I think part of it is we didn't give enough TLC to the delivery side. I think also we had a little bit more resistance depending on which organization you were in. Like I worked at a large financial institution where like everyone was like super gung ho on the CI pipelines, but when it came time to do software delivery, they're like, just give me the manual instructions and I will follow the instructions. And I don't want to learn any other tools to deliver. And I don't care if you have better tools. This is how I've done my job and I'm okay with that. And so we really, really need to move past that. I think we're starting to, but definitely like back in 2019, we were certainly stuck at that point.
Excellent. Anybody else?
I think for
I'll
me,
chime in. Oh, go ahead, Anna.
Anna, you went first, Ana-Margarita. You go.
I think for me it was around like 2018 when I was working with like the sales teams at Gremlin. Like they were putting slide decks into their pitches and stuff, and they're like, chaos engineering is one of those perfect things for day two operations. And I was like, wait, what does that mean? Like I've heard of day zero, day one, but like what is this? And it was really coming to that understanding of like especially when we're talking to a lot of startups, they think that by buying tooling, they can just check things off. And it's like, all right, we have CI/CD, we have observability, we have this for on-call. But being at Gremlin allowed for us to kind of be like, well, you have all these things in place, but how constantly are you ensuring that you're practicing them, that you're training folks? So it made day two become like an activity of like, how do you get ready to withstand anything that can happen as your business is scaling and being successful? Like, let's ensure that you are going to be ready for those chaotic, high peak traffic days.
Agreed. Larry?
Yeah, so I mean the sort of traditional definition I've heard for years is when the fun stuff is over, when you've got a product that you can get customers to use, then it becomes a problem for day two DevOps. That line though is really very fuzzy though, right? You probably need users in Agile and DevOps world long before you get to that point where you're ready to start optimizing for the ilities, reliability, performance, those sorts of things. And I think it's when you get to that point of scale that you really need day two DevOps. And then that's how I've come to think of it. You need people dedicated to essentially focusing on keeping the site up and keeping it performant for the users and secure for the users as well.
And this is a kind of a context point that I've had with customers over the years. Understand your application, understand your business. There's not a lot of value in investing in the rapid delivery of software changes to something like your HR system that isn't customer facing, that doesn't require a lot of changes. Like as long as everybody's getting paid, great, don't touch it, leave it alone. Versus your marketing engine. These things should probably be updated extremely frequently. So prioritizing your effort, knowing your business, knowing the levels of risk, to your point, Larry, about security, there's a big difference between running a phishing supply store and running a large financial institution in terms of the types of attacks that are going to be coming your way and the level of effort you need to put into hardening your systems and making them secure. So
yeah, I mean, and I think the cloud native movement has sort of helped and hurt at the same time, right? Because you've got the developers thinking, oh, I don't need an ops team anymore. I can just use my cloud native tools and just push it. And, the reality is that for the vast majority of these small internally facing apps, I mean, enterprises like Comcast have thousands of apps and only a small fraction of them actually call for a dedicated team, SRE kind of team focused on optimizing them and keeping them up.
Hey, Mitch, you wanted to say something, I thought, before.
Yeah, I was just, and I appreciate everybody's perspective because I think it all makes sense to me. It seems to me like day two DevOps is a recognition of moving something into production isn't a light switch on or off, right? You go through an iterative building up the reliability, the security, the resilience of the application, performance, all those things, they don't get to 100% or whatever measure you want to use, in a few steps. It's an ongoing process as people start using the applications, you're adding more stuff to it. And I really like the focus of day two DevOps because it gives us something to say, well, there's more than just handing over what we created to somebody else to operate, right? Which is very much our old mantra.
It's this idea of like hypercare, right? This from the SAP space. You release, hopefully everything goes perfectly, but usually it does not. And there's time for incremental changes and improvements that are happening now that you're in production. But you don't
that's the DevOps way, Brian, right?
See, I kind of don't like that fail fast methodology because wouldn't succeeding fast be great? Let's go with that approach on things.
Yeah, I know, but yeah, we live in the real world. I mean, yeah, I'd love to succeed fast all the time. We're not. And so this is a very similar thing to what we face in security. Larry and Mitchell will agree with me here. We could put all our eggs in the prevention basket, and then when something goes wrong, we got a lot of omelets. Or we could put a reasonable amount of resources towards preventing and have a reasonable amount of resources towards reaction when something does happen. And so to me, this is a great example. This really hits to the nitty of day two DevOps, which is we live in a real world. We need those feedback loops. It is one of the three ways, right? And all of that good stuff inherent to DevOps. And it is day two DevOps. And we're going to need that. That's how we get better. We're never going to, if we try to live in a world, and I get it as a test engineer, right? We want to make sure we test everything so it works. And of course we do. But we need to live, to recognize that the world we live in, things happen.
Shades of gray. Yep.
I agree. And I love the idea of fail fast. And I think like organizations should embrace it. But what happens when you're in a large enterprise where you're like so mired in the approval process? Like it's so lengthy. And I think that was honestly like such a barrier to failing fast, because it's so easy when you're in a startup, but like, when you're having to deal with like 5 levels of approval just to get a change into prod, I think that's when you get into trouble. And I think that's why you might not even see like that velocity in larger organizations. Yeah. I don't know if anyone's had
this is
like, how do you get past that?
Yeah, I mean, speaking exactly to it, right? The large enterprises, whenever we are talking to customers about, you want to use cloud-based load generators to run a performance test. Awesome. Here's how you whitelist your IPs. And they're like, great, that'll be a 3-week turnaround time with the network security team.
If you're lucky, it's 3 weeks.
So
lucky.
That's good.
So your velocity evaporates in a hot second. You're starting to talk about provisioning these things in 1 minute to be able to start your test after a 3-week delay.
This is exactly why we started TechStrongITSM.com. Because in my view of the world, right, moving from left to right, we've done a good job of adopting Agile for the most part, right? It's 25 years old. It's pretty well understood. It's pretty well settled. It was set, they had a manifesto and everything to begin with. It's been 12 plus years on this DevOps kick. It's more than a kick, on this DevOps train. And at this point, it's matured and we've learned a lot of lessons, and we get a lot of the cultural things around DevOps, and we understand how Agile and DevOps kind of combine, and we're releasing code faster than ever. Is it better quality? I say yes. Is it more secure? I'll say yes. Is it perfect? Hell no. I think the third piece of this continuum is that change management piece. It is that IT service management and ITIL and all of those things that actually are older than DevOps, older than Agile, but need to be dragged kicking and screaming a little bit into the modern world where we've got to do 10x releases. And so the challenge of day 2 DevOps is making it work with the ITSM models of the world, with the change management, with the ITILs of the world, with the project managements, and allowing us to maintain that velocity without sacrificing quality. That's the key.
There's a contention, right, between the two different organizations. The app development organizations are essentially being paid to change things all the time, whereas those ITSM processes are there to essentially say, look, if it's not broken, why are we touching this? Don't make any changes and it will continue to work. And there's a tension between these two viewpoints that the DevOps message can be used to bridge very effectively to talk to, look at all the checks and balances, look at the work that we're doing to ensure that these systems are stable, reliable, high quality, all this kind of stuff, and that it will roll in an automated and well understood, well documented process into your production environment and not break anything.
I mean,
Larry, you got your hand up.
Yeah, I've read dozens of different studies and that sort of touch on this at least, and some that are directly focused on it. The reality is that the ability to release to production really rapidly actually dramatically improves your reliability, your security, your performance, because you're exercising this deployment process regularly, even when you don't have to deploy it fast, and you're getting it faster and faster and faster. And then when you do have an urgent need to release something new to production, to fix a problem or to address an outage or a security incident, you can do it fast. So you're actually more secure. You close the window of risk, the window of exposure, the window of downtime dramatically, and that reacting fast is really sort of the key.
Yeah,
Yeah,
the automated
about flexing those
deployment.
muscles, right?
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Adriana, I lost what you said. I'm
I
sorry.
was just saying it's about flexing those muscles. Like you get in the
Well, it's about
doesn't
muscle
happen
memory
when
too.
you're doing it, and so like making it part of that core culture, right? Which I think, and that's the hardest part, right? It's like, I want to start exercising. Oh, that sounds so annoying. And then like get into it and like, okay, I can run faster. I can run farther. Oh, look, this is great.
Well, we've been
Agreed.
through this transition a couple of times too, or this transformation, right? Remember the development days of what? We're going to release once a week, once a day. That's insane. How could
Jarring,
we?
right?
How could we? More or less, why would we subject ourselves to that? Now it's like of course, we would like to do that or are doing that. Seems like that's the maturation cycle we're going with day 2, right? Is how do we bridge? How do we help transform our thinking about how operations and development work in this more continuous cycle of delivery? And what does that mean? And how do you adopt what you do well, and what do you adjust to make it flow better?
Go ahead, Ana.
Ana-Margarita, Brian, I'm coming back to you, I promise. But Ana-Margarita hasn't been talking enough. I need to hear from her.
I got this. I think some of it goes with like speaking the same language. So for us, like working in the observability space, is like that ITSM team actually does have to be looking at the similar stuff that your SREs and your DevOps day 2 folks are looking at. That way everyone has the same information. And I'll go back to my chaos engineering days or like load testing days too, where it's like you constantly want to be running through scenarios in order to know. And I meant to piggyback off earlier when we were talking about like fail faster, go a little slower. And you do have to see those moments of uncomfortableness where you kind of get to look for those unknown unknowns while practicing those known unknowns that you do have in your infrastructure and your application. So we do have to find ways to get out of our comfort zone, whether it's talking to the teams that are always grumpy at us, or whether it's like, hey, we're not necessarily sure how this application is going to survive when we scale the load a little bit more, or when we are launching something new.
Agreed. Brian?
Yeah, and one endemic challenge that I still see across the many customers that I speak with is, how does the IT operations team align with or get development aligned with their tasks as well? One of the big challenges that I see out there is the IT team is looking at their Oracle database and they're planning an upgrade to a different version. Meanwhile, development doesn't know about that. They're not aware of that change. They're still continuing to work on that, or worse, they're just using whatever version of Oracle they want with whatever system permissions, and every development effort is done with full sysadmin rights, and then they're wondering why it's not deploying properly in the production, not working properly in that context. There's a huge amount of alignment, and this came out of the SRE space and has really led to the rise of platform engineering as another discipline on top of and alongside the DevOps effort.
Agreed. Larry, you wanted to go back to something Adriana said. Go for it.
Yeah. So, as you know, Alan, and maybe the audience doesn't, my background is development. I'm still an active developer, write code almost every day. I'm primary author of a dozen open source projects, one of which gets 1 million downloads a month, used by every cloud vendor and every cryptocurrency exchange, et cetera. I mean, so I'm very deep on sort of the developer side, but my day job, what I get paid for, is essentially more on the operations side, more on the security side of things. And so I sort of have a natural ability to bridge that gap. And I was an agile transformation consultant for years. And I learned essentially that just having a great idea of a way to operate is just a small part of solving the problem. You have to actually get entire large organizations to transform. And so I talk about organizational pathologies that you have to overcome. Pathology as in like illnesses kind of thinking. And these are things like we hinted at earlier, local optimization, right? The ops team is optimized for staying up, and change results in going down, so they don't want to do that. The development team is optimized for new features, so they want to ship faster. Things like CYA thinking and leadership, right? Sometimes people know that the scientific evidence for doing something is strong, but all of their peers at other organizations are doing it the old way. And so if I just do it the old way, then I'm not like liable if something goes wrong. But if I try the new way, then I'm more liable. So you have to use psychology and sociology and sort of changing the organizational structure in order to overcome these. And that's sort of I think the key to getting at what Adrian was talking about earlier.
And I
Larry,
would say to add to that, the other thing, and I learned this early on in my career where I had like lofty goals and lofty ideas of changing things, and coming in and telling people the way you're doing it sucks is not
That's
going
not the right way. They're not going to result. Yeah.
You have to be very gentle about it. And you have to make friends, and you have to be like, look, this is why this is such a great idea. And you almost have to find some allies in the individual contributors, but also in the executives, right? Because you need like that mandate from the executive level, but they have to be bought in, because there's like executives that are told like, thou shalt do this transformation because CTO said so, and they're like, okay, but their heart's not into it. So you need like an executive that's totally into it. You also need some individual contributors that are totally into it, so you have that nice little convergence to make that transformation happen.
I found that the higher up you go in the executive chain, though, the more likely they are to listen to evidence and reason and logic, and be willing to sort of do experiments. And that's a key lever you have, right? Oh, we're not going to do this for everything. We're not going to do this for our crown jewels. We're just going to do an experiment. And then that's how you build those allies. That's how you get the local evidence that it works. That's how you prove that it's safe. For the mid-level managers, it's usually the grassroots people are okay. The high-level executives are okay. It's the mid-level managers that have the most to lose in change, because their world changes on them. They lose their domain of control. Their expertise was built basically incrementally, as opposed to by being just a huge talent. Usually those folks are in the high executive ranks. So you got to work from the top down with the executive sponsorship, and from the bottom up with the grassroots with these experiments.
And for doing the grassroots and like getting those individual contributors like to get involved, like a lot of companies are like, I don't know how to do that. And one of the things that I've seen in the field that I feel like works really well, whether it's for SRE, for security, doing like championship programs in a way, whereas like doing little courses, people come, they learn about the topics, and then they start getting interested. So they can have a little homework of like, how is it that I can take the security learning to my organization and make a little improvement? And then they do like weeks where they do more of these, and then they go, and the new ICs like go evangelize these concepts to other parts of the organization. So you're getting individuals to go do the work for you, and they're now using their like political capital of the organization to be like, this is what we should do. And that's how like new leadership also gets involved of like, that seems really interesting.
I often lament that in my education, I took computer science and physics, because psychology would have been so much more useful to my day-to-day of cajoling people into understanding that it's not about the technology that you have. I often tell people, if you don't have 95% of every software platform you need to run a full DevOps transformation, it's because you have 100%. You may be missing one little thing that you might plug with an open source or maybe a commercial product, but you've got all the tools. You've got your source code, you've got your CI, you've got the key pieces that you need. It's about how you use them and the structure and the interaction of the different teams who need to start participating. You'll hear a lot of shift left coming into this, where the quality teams in particular, all through the 2010s, rebelled against this. And like, no, that's a developer tool. I don't want to learn how to use a source code management repository or a CI system. Well, the world is changing, and we need to change along with it and keep up and be meaningful participants in the process.
You know, it's interesting. I
Excellent
didn't know
point.
that we would go here, but the theme that I'm hearing over and over is change management skills, and not change control board skills, change management in terms of people and organizational. And so it isn't just delivering code day two DevOps into production. It's helping the different parts, the whole organization be ready or start to adapt to the changes that are occurring, right? Again, it's not just flip on a light switch, we're doing 10 deploys a day or an hour. It's a process to get there, and it isn't a technology problem.
Yeah, no, this goes, I asked each of you, what does day two DevOps mean to you? When did you first hear about it? So, being at DevOps.com, I probably heard it maybe before some of you, but probably not Larry. He's a DevOps Renaissance man. He heard it before me. But when I first started hearing about it, to me, it was so damn hard to get DevOps adopted and going, not organization or enterprise-wide, just on a team. To say, I'm going to adopt, right? We're already using Agile, or we're moving from waterfall to Agile, but I'm going to adopt this kind of cross-functional approach, and we're going to do software pipelines, and we're going to shift left, and we're going to, automate as much as we can and do some continuous testing, and we're going to deploy with the press of a button or just automatically. That was such a hurdle that when people did it, and not at an enterprise level, very few companies did it in an enterprise level, a small team within an enterprise, a segment, a division, that when they got that first piece done, they were exhausted. They were like, they thought they just ran the marathon and they needed 3 days to recover or longer. And the concept that day two was, okay, now you did that. Now the fun really begins. Now, how do we operationalize that, make that our normal? Not just the new, but the normal. How do we get it moving? How do we bust out from this little bubble where we're doing it and make it go organizationally across, the entire enterprise? That was quite a hurdle. Day two, if day one DevOps was scaling Kilimanjaro, day two DevOps was getting to, the Himalayas, K2 or one of those. And it's hard. I think it's still hard. I think it's still too hard. It's not as hard as it was 8-9 years ago, but it's still too hard.
And part of that is cultural acceptance. Right?
Yes.
Where people are getting more familiar with the concept. They're hearing the terms more frequently. They're becoming more understood across the industry, but also some technology changes as well. Things are getting easier. The tools are getting better to help streamline some of the more egregious problems that we faced in the early 2010s, dealing with this stuff, whether that's through plugins into your CI tool or better command line interfaces or whatever it is. It's just an incremental improvement. And there's never going to be a solid end state that we're all going to achieve and go, great, we're done. That's never going to happen.
DevOps is never done.
There's always more you can do. And it's not about the destination as much as it is about the journey and the value that you can extract from it. There's so much that you can get in terms of benefit. To your point, do it with one team and they feel like this is an enormous effort and they're exhausted by it. And then along come people like Bryan saying, here's continuous performance, we want you to implement that next. Or Larry talking about continuous security, or Ana talking about, let's do observability now, please. It's like there's all these other things that need to go into the process. This is great. You've got job security, everybody. It's fantastic. There's so much interesting stuff that you can do.
So Larry, this is an interesting parallel what's going on now to what happened at the beginning of the Agile movement. I was essentially early adopter in the Agile movement, and I went to go work for Agile Transformation Organization, Rally Software, and we said, well, you can't do big bang Agile transformation. You have to do one team at a time Agile transformation. And then 3 years later, somebody came in and said, we're going to do a big bang transformation at Ford Motor Company. And they're like, no, it's going to fail. It's going to fail. But they're like, no, we'd reached a tipping point where there was enough knowledge, there was enough sort of organic stuff that the big bang really wasn't a huge lift, and it actually was more efficient to do that way going forward from that point forward. So I think we're starting to get to that point. We're still not there yet, where we could start to do a big bang transformation to essentially a true DevOps way of operating.
I feel like that could be feasible because I feel like, DevOps 1.0 was like testing the waters and figuring out how it works. Mm-hmm. And DevOps 2.0, we're like, okay, we understand how this works. Now there's like more moving parts, right? Because we're tacking on observability and we're hopefully upping our testing game and our security game, which we should have been doing in the first place. But, it's a process. But I think as we learn how to do these things, and as was mentioned before, like we have better tooling around it, because I think that was like a huge problem initially in the DevOps movement. It's like, okay, I get how this is supposed to work, but you've got to have like all these integrations, right? It's like, I need this part and this part and this part. How do they all play together? Can you make it easier? Can we codify? So like now we're codifying our pipelines. Like, these are things that we didn't have before, and which I think make it a little bit easier so that people are less scared of DevOps pipelines. Because I think that was one thing that was, I think, terrifying for some folks, is like, oh, what do I do with this? How do I do this? I don't get it, right?
And I think some of it is not necessarily always more tooling, is just more success stories. Whereas like we had like DevOps days come about, and like they have their little on-conference sessions where folks get to share the experience of like, this is what it was like to try to optimize our pipeline, or how we are onboarding to a new monitoring observability vendor, or like how do we actually set up on-call rotations. Like we talked, like change management is the hardest part, and how is it a better way to do that, but to have a success story that helps with it, or for someone to be like, this is how we did it in our organization, like come shadow us for like 2-3 days and then like learn how to do it. But then I also wanted to piggyback off something Adriana said. It was like DevOps 2.0. I'm like, wouldn't that necessarily just be the SRE movement in a way? That is like
some people say it's platform engineering. Some people say it's observability. It's all part of DevOps, right? Yeah. Mitchell, we need to talk to these folks about DevOps next. We should get some of their views on it. Mitchell's working on a huge report right now. It's kind of a flagship for us here at TechStrong.
I'm literally writing down notes as everybody's talking.
Yeah, I mean, it is important. So, but that brings us to, back to the abstract, right? I hate to use the 2.0 stuff because it's been cliched, but, things like observability, things like platform engineering, things like SRE have certainly extended the basic DevOps into DevOps, right? If we could think of it that way. I mean, there's more to this than just that CI/CD pipeline. There's a lot more.
There is, right? Absolutely. It's about automating the delivery of all the underlying components that the software engineering teams need to do their job and deliver applications into production. So if I'm a developer, I need a place to do a deployment of my web service. Where's that going to go? Don't rely on me, the developer, to come up with the system. Have the platform engineering team provide that to me in the same context that it will be running in production. Because right away, if I'm a developer and I try to run it as if it's running in production and it doesn't work, that's fantastic. The developers love this because now they're not being told 6 weeks later when there's a deployment window and they're trying to get it to work that it doesn't, and they have to go back and figure out what they were thinking and address it there. They're learning immediately. And that feedback cycle, that really quick turnaround on information exchange, is the real valuable part of a DevOps process. And that's what enables the velocity that everybody's looking for.
And I would add to that, add to that observability. We can use observability to really enable that feedback process by having observable pipelines. And so understanding like when your pipeline is failing, now you have information as to why, how long certain steps take, et cetera, et cetera. Sorry, Anna, I cut you off.
Oh, I was just saying fail fast, but it also goes with the observable, like hand in hand.
So here's another thing that I don't think gets enough play. The whole cloud native movement, where would it be without DevOps? And where would DevOps be without cloud native? To a large degree, right?
Right. They're hand in hand.
They go together. I think it's, again, part of that same continuum I've been talking about. And I see it play out at KubeCon, right? I've been going to KubeCon now since there was a KubeCon just about, right? And I saw a shift over the last, let's say, 2 years at KubeCon, where we moved from, it was all Kubernetes all the time, and Kubernetes was about deployment for the most part, right? To observability and post deployment and maintaining and operating a cloud native environment. It's not just about getting my code onto the containers and having the containers deployed. It's about
SRE, platform engineering are all part of that conversation now, right?
absolutely. And but it's core to cloud native. You can't have cloud native without this stuff.
Well,
And-
you wouldn't
Go
have
ahead.
microservices without DevOps, and you wouldn't have containerization without microservices.
So, it's not a chicken and the egg question necessarily, but it's this continuum. That's what I call it, the continuum, right? And none of it happens without Agile, right?
Agile is more of a sort of like a precursor. I'd say DevOps and cloud native and we're sort of hand in hand and still growing like this. And SRE is sort of, there's a traditional flavor of SRE, and I think platform engineering is sort of the new flavor that goes better with that later one. I know that's controversial in some circles.
No, you know what? I think we're going to be doing some work with the folks at PlatformCom on platform engineering, and we're going to have a panel on that, Larry, and folks, I'll reach out to you when we do, and when I solidify it more. But it's real. It's all part of, and if we want to call this day 2 DevOps, I'm okay with that too. Just don't call me late for dinner. Speaking of calling me late for dinner, though, we're about out of time here. What a fantastic discussion this was. I think we could have gone all day, but how long will people sit and watch us? But that being said, Adriana, Ana-Margarita, one day I'm going to say it like you, and I'm going to be so proud of myself. Larry, Bryan, thank you for joining us on this episode of DevOps Unbound. Again, many thanks to our friends at Tricentis for co-producing, sponsoring. Mitchell, as always, thank you. Take the last word and take us home.
It reminds me of the whole idea behind DevOps Days, which is it's about sharing. It's the experiences that really benefit each other and learning that from each other, not just the best way to construct a pipeline or whatever the task at hand might be. These kind of conversations is where, the IQ levels for all of us raise. And so thanks for doing that panel.
Thank you. Until next time, this is Alan Shimel for TechStrong Group and Tricentis. We hope you've enjoyed this episode of DevOps Unbound. Bye-bye, everyone. Have a great day.
Hi, everyone.